Welcome to the new episode of RisknFlow. My name is Jane Marie, and today I have a wonderful guest, so don't miss this episode. Today I'm gonna talk with a pioneer in LGBT-friendly tourism in Finland, and also founder of We Speak Gay, Hannu Medina. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
It's wonderful that you are here today. You are really a pioneer in this. And actually, what I remember, you was a guest. You were a guest in my Finnish episode, and you told you were the first couple to marry here in Finland. Was it the 1st of March in 2017, right?
Yeah, actually, yeah, and that's a very special day. Of course, it's our wedding day, but it's also talking about LGBTQ inclusive communication. It was also the starting point, in a way, for my business. Of course, at that time, I didn't realize it, but we were staying in a hotel in Helsinki because at that time I was already blogging together with my husband. We had a blog called Life of Two Men, and in the beginning of 2017, we contacted the organizer of this event, which was called Finally Getting Married. It was funded by the Kone Foundation in Finland, and they kind of invited 10 couples to a venue in Helsinki to celebrate the 1st of March 2017, when it was possible for the first time for same-sex couples to get married. And at that time we were still living in Turku in Finland, and this event was in Helsinki, in the capital. So I was just like Googling and looking around for like hotels that we would work as bloggers to create content on this very special day. And for some reason, Hotel Helka caught my attention. So we spent like a couple of days in the Helka hotel. Our wedding pictures were taken in their premises or in the hotel, and they were like distributing and sharing our wedding photos in their social media channels. Of course, we as bloggers in our social media channels. And that's when I kind of felt all the time when we were staying in the hotel that I feel so safe. And why do I feel so safe? And when we got back to Turku, I started to think like it was all about the values, and the values were kind of showed in so many different ways, in customer service, in the reception, the way we were like cooperating with the staff of the hotel, the way we were cooperating with their partners, which were like social media companies. And I also felt the same among other guests. So that's when I kind of thought that, okay, I want more of this. And that's kind of really the first starting point of We Speak Gay. We Speak Gay came to being like maybe 2 years later, but that was like when I started thinking about these things. So like what it is that makes me as a gay person or as a gay couple feel safe.
That's really interesting theme, that how can all people, every people feel safe in despite the environment. Soon you will let know us more about this, but also we want to know, Hannu, we want to know a little bit your story. Where have you born? How was your childhood? Tell me a little about yourself.
Well, I was born in a small Swedish or kind of Swedish Finnish-speaking town called Pietarsaari. In Swedish, it's called Jakobstad, in the late 60s. And to a normal family, I had like 3 siblings. I was the youngest. And I would say that I lived a very normal, happy life as a child, as a young boy. So I never really felt any kind of homophobia because I was in the closet, obviously. Like many at that time, especially, you have to remember in the 1960s when I was born, homosexuality was still a crime. It was criminalized. And in the 80s, in the 70s, when I was a small boy, it was still seen as an illness. And of course, then in the 80s, we had the AIDS, HIV or AIDS epidemic in the world. So it wasn't like the kind of how would you say, it wasn't like the time where you felt like this is a totally normal thing to be gay. And of course, in those days, I didn't really realize that I was gay. I just had these feelings. And so I started to live my normal life. I moved to Turku for studying, and then I met my ex-wife, and I got married, and I had like 3 children. 2 of them are adopted, and the youngest one is biological. So a very, I would say, normal life. And I had a like normal family life, like anybody. That's how I feel, or I felt.
That's always interesting to describe as a normal life, a normal life as we in the society wanted everybody to live, right?
Yeah. But I would think that that's very. My parents were from the countryside, so I would think that in the 1970s, I was kind of very, in a way, I would say, stereotypical life, that you have your parents who have moved to a bigger city and they're from the countryside. And in those days, they were like very common that there were like 3, 4 children in the family. And I at least now when I look back at it, I feel like it was very, if you can say, like stereotypical normal Finnish family life. That's how I feel.
But as you describe, being in a closet as a also young man growing in a area that is actually quite like religious, also that part of Finland, and I can assume there was no resources to search for the subject or being gay or being different.
Yeah.
How was it to like be in the closet on those times?
It's really hard to explain because I didn't know that I was in the closet in those days. I didn't realize it. I was in like life, and of course I had these feelings. But now when I look back at it, of course I can see that if there would have been the same kind of information that we have right now, probably I could have lived a totally different life. But that's the way it was, and it's really kind of difficult to say that this is the way you are supposed to be in the closet, or this is the way you are supposed to be out of the closet. Everybody has his or her or their own path, and but of course in the 70s there wasn't like any talk. Of course, we didn't discuss, like probably no family was discussing these kind of issues. Like nowadays, when I talk with young couples or young parents, they are talking about sexual and gender diversity together and with their children, or my daughter is talking about as a kindergarten teacher. But in the 1970s, we still also had this legislation in Finland that you were not supposed to talk about these issues. Because we had this legislation that said that if you're talking about these issues, for example, in media, we couldn't have had, for example, this kind of discussion. I couldn't have my business because every time you were talking about sexual and gender diversity, you were supposed to like encourage people to be gay. So until 1999, we had these kind of legislations. The reason why we didn't have all this information and all this like we have now into 2024. So it was a totally different kind of era with no information about, and especially, of course, in a small city and a small town where I lived. Well, I don't think.
Yeah, that's a bit.
I think it was that much about the religion. It wasn't the religion. It was like the total legislation and the atmosphere in Finland in general.
Yeah, that's like the thing that we acknowledge that those things exist, but then we put just the law there that you are not allowed to mention, to speak, to be in any way to bring these things up.
Yeah.
Even though we know that these exist.
Yeah. It's kind of like double standard in a way, like kind of know that it exists, but you're not allowed to talk about it or any information. But that was like, and nowadays I always, when I talk with people, especially like Generation Z or younger generations, I always try to, when they are saying that this is how it is now, I always remind them that there are still people living in Finland and all over the world who were born in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s now, when this was not the case. and those memories stay in their head for the rest of their lives. So even though we have a really different situation right now, we also have to acknowledge and understand that most of the LGBTQ people who are living right now have lived a totally different kind of life than we are living right now.
Yeah, for sure. And luckily, we have come a long way from those days. Even though we still have work to do for that, we have we speak gay doing this wonderful work for these topics. You also mentioned that you had your family, you had your wife, your children, and then I suppose you came out of the closet and you change your life. What was the turning point in your life to realize to come out
Yeah.
as a person you are?
Yeah. Well, of course, it's very common that when you reach the age of 19, or like when you're in your 40s, 50s, and your children start to be grown ups, they have their own lives, and you have more time to yourself. You kind of get out of that very hectic period in your life when you have the family, you start your first own apartments and jobs. But then I was like in my mid 40s, and like I said, my kids were already like teenagers, and I met a young guy, and kind of for the first time I kissed a man, and that was the first time that kind of something exploded in my head. And for a short time, for a few weeks or even months, I thought that I was in love with this young man. But actually, now later, I realized that it was the first time that I really fell in love with myself, or I got connection with my own feelings, and I really felt like really deeply that this is the true Hannu. This is how I should feel. This is what I've been like. What I've been somehow missing all my life. And for around 1 year, I tried to fight against this feeling, because I never thought that I would get the divorce. I wanted to stay in the family. I wanted to have my family, but it was like probably after one year, because I already also had come out to my ex-wife. But after 1 year, I realized that if I really want to be the person I am, or if I really want to find who I am, I can't stay in the marriage. And yeah, in those days, of course, I was thinking that being gay was just about sex and having the possibility to have like gay sex. But later on, I realized it's so much more. It's about your identity, who you really are, what you like, what you think, what are your ideas, what are your passions. It's not just about what you are doing in bed or in the bedroom. It's about who you are. And kind of, I realized that in a way I had been in a cage all my life. I don't say that I was unhappy. No, I had a really nice, happy life. But and probably if situation would have been different, maybe I could have stayed in the marriage. I don't know. But for me, I realized that in order to be true to myself, to be really totally honest to myself and to other people, I need to kind of step out of the marriage and start the life as an open gay man.
And that's wonderful. And actually, yeah, I think when talking about gays and all that, the first thing stereotypically you might think that what happens in the bedroom and the sex-related stuff. Of course, it's so much more. And well, I would say that's natural. Everybody does these things, and that's it. There's no more to it, you know?
Yeah.
And would you said...
Yeah.
Go ahead, yeah? The doggy.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I was about to say, you said you were like 1 year going back and forth what to do. Was it then a risk for you to really make that decision that, hey, this is who I am. I'm gonna be my Was it a risk for you to change your life totally, I assume?
Yeah, I think it's always a big risk for coming out, whether it's like coming out every day or coming out as me for the first time talking about my sexuality to anybody. But talking about risk is a lot to do with things that you can't tell. You are not sure what will happen, whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're in your private life making decisions. So for me, it was a huge risk. I didn't know how big risk it was actually, because I didn't know how people would react. And the reason why people normally are in the closet is because they are afraid how people will react, how people will, what kind of attitudes people have. So of course it was a huge risk, and that's probably why it took so long for me to make the final decision, almost like 1 year. And yeah, I feel like I'm sure that if I would have known that, because when you come out, of course you get a lot of things. You can be true to yourself, you can be totally honest, but at the same time you also lose a lot of things. And this is something that people don't always understand. Coming out is not just like happy, yeah, I'm out. No, it's a lot of like loss as well. So I lost a lot of friends. In a way, I lost my family in some way, because I'm in contact with my ex-wife. And so there's a lot of like, there was a lot of risk that kind of, I didn't even understand that this would happen. And yeah, and one of the biggest risks was probably that I didn't have any idea what it is to be gay. I didn't know what it is to be living with a man. I didn't know anything. I had never met gay couples. I had no gay friends. So it was totally a new world.
No.
Of course, during that 10 or 1 year, I was like trying to find out and trying to find like people who are in the same kind of situation. But still, it was like a lot of like things I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
So it was a huge
That's
risk.
kind of,
It was a risk that I just had to take.
yeah, I was about to say that's kind of sad when you take that risk and you are the real Hannu, but then people around you may disappear. You need to make some sacrifices. How were people then facing you in did they have like a
Well, of course,
conversation normally with you? Is there like, could you see the difference or feel the difference?
Yeah, of course, in my situation, it was like quite different, because you can't always separate which kind of attitudes are becoming because of the divorce and which are because I'm coming out. But of course, there was a lot of like really awkward situations when I was still like, where I had already come out, but I was still like attending some family events or visiting my goddaughter's graduation and these kind of things. And of course, I felt like there was some people who were kind of, they didn't know how to talk to me because I was gay all of a sudden. So it was really, 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 really awkward situations as well. But yeah, it's when you have this kind of coming out process, it's probably first you need to come. I came out to my ex-wife. I came out to my best like friends from since I was child. I came out to our common friends. I came out to our like my co-workers in my job. And then when I was living the first year, I always call the first year was my teenage year. I was like a teenager. The first year I was openly gay. But also during that year, there was a lot of like, I remember I was dating a guy in Helsinki. I was at that time still living in Turku, and we spent a lot of time together. But at some point I realized that I never posted pictures of us together. And I realized I was still like in social media, I was closeted. And to have kind of like stress in your head, like what kind of pictures I'm posting and what I'm not, I realized that I in order to be, or I wanted to be totally open. So that's when I also, after probably like 10 months being openly gay, I also came out in social media telling my story, because I felt like that's somehow I wanted to do also this like in public and say that this is who I am. But like I said, it's everybody's own path and everybody's doing it their own way. So there's no one way how to do this.
Yeah, I think there's no right or wrong. Sort of everybody have their own path to do these things on their own way. You said you met this young man and you fell in love. As you mentioned in the beginning of the episode, you were first couple to marry in Finland. Can you tell us a little bit how you two met?
Well, yeah, that was also like I had been out for 1 year living on my own in Turku, and it was in 2016. I remember. Now when I look back at it, I remember that Raul, my husband Raul, started following me in Instagram, and it was like March 18, 2016, when he finally, after being following me for a few months, he sent me a DM. He DM'd me saying that you're a beautiful man. And that happened in Instagram. And at that time, I was unemployed and I was like traveling a lot. And I kind of just told him like, wow, that's really cool, because he was at that time, he was in Mexico visiting his family. And I was just saying like, oh, wow, I would really like to come to Mexico. And he replied right away that, well, you're welcome any time. So that's when we started chatting. And during, I would say that during already the chatting period online, we fell in love. And this happened like when we first met online was in March. And then I traveled to Mexico in June, and we spent 3 weeks together traveling in Mexico City, in Querétaro, in Los Cabos, different parts of Mexico. And yeah, after 3 months, when we were like, I was almost heading to the airport. It was probably the second last day of my visit. I just felt really strong, and I proposed to him, and invited him to come to Finland. And then he arrived to Finland in the end of October 2016. Yeah, so that wasn't probably the best time to arrive to Finland, because it's the darkest time here. But anyway, I was a little afraid actually about that. Oh my God, I wish he would come a little earlier when we still have like summer. But yeah, and then we registered our partnership right away on the 1st of December, because at that time we still didn't have the legislation of same-sex marriage.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, we got married as the first gay couple on the 1st of March 2017. So that's our story. He's listening to me there beside me.
Hola, if he hears me. But yeah, that's such a wonderful story. And actually, I want to bring your story up because, of course, as you have mentioned yourself, you need to have your own history, story, and experience about these things to be able to promote and bring these themes up. And now tell about a little bit also, you had the We Speak K, you had the blog with your husband and all that, but how you really get your entrepreneurship started with the We Speak Gay then?
Yeah. Well, like I said, quite in the beginning, like We Speak Gay, the idea of We Speak Gay probably came up already during our wedding on the 1st of March 2017, when I realized that in this hotel we were staying, that I felt really safe. But it took like more than 1 year before I kind of really started like, actually, it was like 1 year later at the Matka Fair, which is the biggest travel fair in Finland. I launched the page Gay Travel Finland, because I realized that no destination in Finland, or actually no company in Finland, was promoting Finland as an LGBTQ-friendly destination. So I first started the page, gaytravelfinland.com, to promote Finland. And it was after that I realized that the companies really needed like help in communicating. And the difference between Finland and a lot of these so-called established LGBTQ travel company or LGBTQ friendly countries in the world is that they've been doing this business since the 1970s or 1980s. And in Finland, when I started talking about these things in 2018, nobody understood at all what I was talking about. Because in Finland, we have this idea that, well, everybody's welcome to Finland, that we don't need to think too much about it. And that was actually in 2018, when first time I started traveling around to attend these LGBTQ travel fairs in ITB Berlin, Fitur in Madrid, IGLT Convention in New York. And I was just talking to companies and representatives of LGBTQ, like travel agencies, like talking that Finland is very equal and everybody's welcome. And they started asking, what does it mean? How do you do it? What kind of products you have? What kind of like communication, media, bloggers? And I was like, what? Really? We need all this? And that's when I kind of realized that in Finland, we take these things for granted. We don't understand that you need to be, you need to vocalize, you need to symbolize, you need to visualize LGBTQ inclusion. It's not something that's somehow obvious. And the reason why you need to do this is that even now, like in every third country, homosexuality is criminalized. And in most of the countries in the world, being gay is not socially acceptable, not to mention like the rights of trans people or non-binary people. So in Finland, we take these things for granted, that it's obvious, and we don't make it loud. We don't make promotion about how LGBTQ friendly country we actually are. So that's the big challenge in Finland. So we have a lot of potential here, but really need to see what other countries are doing, and we don't need to like come up with everything by ourselves. Of course, we can just like copy certain things, but then it's of course also important to understand what's very unique about the Finnish society, unique with Finland. So it's kind of mix of things that others are doing and coming up with something unique that's totally Finnish.
It seems there's a huge gap if we started only 2018 to bring these themes really up.
And sometimes it's hard.
Globally, there's like...
Yeah. Sometimes it's really hard.
Compared to globally.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard for countries, like even in Germany. I was attending ITB Berlin, which is the biggest travel fair, and they have a separate like area for sustainable tourism and LGBTQ tourism. And I was attending a panel discussion there, and when I was talking that we kind of started all this in 2018, they are like, "What? How can that be possible?" But I would say that it's not just about Finland. It's also all the Scandinavian countries are a little like lacking behind. If you compare to Spain, if you compare to Mexico, Colombia, Argentina, Israel, Japan, South Africa, all these, Malta, which is the most LGBTQ friendly country in the world, Canada, USA. So, yeah.
How we actually, if we compared in globally, as your husband is from Mexico and the Spain is more advanced on these things, how we compare to globally on these topics? Are we really on the top bottom there?
No,
what can we do?
Yeah, it's a lot about, of course, when you're ranking, for example, the most LGBTQ friendly countries, of course, the most important thing is the legislation. And when it comes to legislation, the Scandinavian countries, well, we are not anymore in the top because Malta, Spain has gone like or ahead of us nowadays. But when it comes to legislation, we are quite in the top 10, I would say, something like that. And also when it comes to like safety, it's Finland is seen or is like ranked as one of the safest countries in the world. And that's, of course, a really big asset in the LGBTQ tourism. But then the thing that we are missing is the communication. That's where we are lacking behind. For example, Spartacus Gay Travel Index is one of the kind of probably most popular index of the most LGBTQ-friendly countries in the world. And they focus very much on the legislation, of course, what is their LGBTQ rights in certain countries. But they also take into account like which countries are doing LGBTQ inclusive marketing in their travel business. And in the latest one that was just published a few weeks ago, there was only Finland and Sweden that were seen as countries that are doing LGBTQ inclusive marketing tourism. So, for example, Denmark, Norway, and Iceland were not like among those countries. And in this ranking, Finland was at in the last gay travel Spartacus Gay Travel Index. Finland was number 13. So we are, of course, when you think about like 200 countries in the world, we are quite in the top. There is still potential to do even better. And then when doing better, I'm talking about like the marketing, the communication, the sales, the product development, these kind of things. And of course, there's still also when it comes to legislation, but we are quite good already there. Of course, we still need to work on those issues as well.
I think many of us can argue that, okay, we are gay friendly. Why need to promote that thing as we sort of take it granted? We are like pro diversity and all that. So why really need to bring these themes up that, hey, we really are LGBT friendly and everybody's welcome? Why is it important?
Well, if you want to make business, if you want to really make business, you need to do marketing, because taking things. If I would do, for example, that Finland is in the 7th year in a row the happiest country in the world. How much are we using that thing in all our marketing? And for example, in Italy, they make a couple of years ago a kind of customer survey among LGBTQ travelers, where they were asking like, what are the countries that you feel are the most, like the best places for LGBTQ travelers to travel to? And Finland and Scandinavia countries were in the top, but we are not like exploiting the brand and the image that we have. So it's at the same time, of course, I'm talking about like diversity, equity, inclusion. So it's very important to do it for us, for LGBTQ people, not just in the travel business, but in the businesses in general. But I'm also saying that if you want to make good business, and if you want to attract the pink euro, which is the kind of money that the LGBT people are using, you need to do actions. You need to do marketing, you need to do communication, you need to do sales, you need to go to fairs, you need to do advertising, you need to have products. So it's both sides. It's the LGBTQ rights and it's their business.
Do you see the risky business to be really promote these things? Because of course, always there's the other side that really don't see what's the point.
Yeah. Well, nowadays, if you think that based on the surveys from Generation Z, which is the generation that has lived during 2000, like after millennium, already 20% think themselves as part of the LGBTQ community. So it's in the future, I feel like it's not about making a choice. It's a necessity. You need to be LGBTQ inclusive. You need to understand what it means to be like what is gender and sexual diversity, because otherwise you will lose money. Now people still think that when you talk about like being gay friendly, that you are kind of losing some customers, but I'm sure that we are moving towards a kind of a era where if you don't take into account gender and sexual diversity, you will lose the market. Because I'm talking with a lot of like recruiters, companies who are recruiting, and they say that the generations Z, which is now entering the labor market, which is entering as a consumer, they are expecting this. In the same way, they are talking about like environmental issues. How is your company taking care of environment? In the same way, the generations that are coming, they are asking, how are you talking about these issues? How do I know that I'm safe here? How is your company inclusive? So it's not anymore like a choice that, of course, you can always make the choice, but in order to be like sustainable or responsible for human in social aspect, you really need to take into account this in the future. And now there's a big gap between when I'm talking with my kids who are Generation Z and when I'm like educating companies or people who are my generation. It's a huge gap. My generation are sometimes asking, like, what's the point of this? This is stupid. This is funny. Why should we do? Why should we take into account like gender or sexual diversity? And then when I'm talking with my kids' generation, they are like totally like, what, Dad, in what world are you living in? What is that world? Because it's so like weird for them that these things are so like still kind of mystery for my generation. Because for them, it's totally obvious that you need to be inclusive. You need to understand these words. You need to get.
Yeah, and actually, and those like your children now, they gonna be working with those big bosses on those companies that represent those sort of old-fashioned values, and when they kind of interact, and I think there's a huge like a generation gap, how they can the older people adapt to the new generation, because that's what they think it's not relevant anymore. They need to change, really.
Yeah. And that's why I'm here. But also like talking about when I talk with companies and representatives of companies, and I'm sure it's the same thing with a lot of like DEI consultants who are working with companies on these diversity and inclusion issues. Very often the first answer is always like, well, everybody's equal in our company. Everybody's welcome. It's obvious. And then when you make surveys, when you really start collecting data, the data might be totally different. And I would here refer to the European Union survey from 2019, where they made the survey and asked in each European Union country, for example, in the workplace, they asked LGBTQ people, like, can you be totally open about yourself, who you really are? And in Finland, there was only 8%. So more than 9 out of 10 feel like my workplace is not safe enough for me to be gay or openly LGBTQ person. And when I talk with companies, I haven't met probably zero company who would say that this is a problem, because they always assume that everybody's equal. And when you start asking people, really, how do you feel? What is your experience? The result might be totally different. And that kind of explains how huge gap we still have. And my view is that this is not about totally like Finland would be so homophobic or transphobic, because the result is really, really bad. It's more about like that when you don't communicate, when you don't talk about these issues, when you don't say that this is how we think in our workplace, these are our values, and when you don't make like inclusive communication, how should I know that this is a safe space? And for an LGBTQ person, the easiest, the safest way is to be in the closet. Okay, I don't talk anything about my family or my partner here. I will just focus on the work. So it's a lot about talking. It's a lot about like communicating and making these values that people normally have inside their head, making them visible somehow.
Yeah.
Whether it's about words, whether it's about picture, whether it's about symbols.
Yeah, I think that's super important. And as you told in the beginning of the episode that you went to that Hotel Helga, right?
Yeah.
That where you could feel safe or you somehow felt super safe and comfortable to be yourself. Do you have any stories, if you compare, for example, traveling, how you get the feeling of being safe as a gay person, as you are on some countries, and maybe other countries you feel totally different? How you can tell?
Well, of course, the biggest is always the legislation. If I can't travel, of course, I can travel safe to a country where being gay is criminal, because that's totally dangerous. But if I'm thinking about, for example, I travel a lot to Spain, and Spain is one of the most LGBTQ-friendly countries in the world. If I compare, for example, to Finland or to Scandinavian countries, of course, the difference is that the amount of LGBTQ communication. For example, I was just in Valencia with my husband for a few months. Valencia is probably not the kind of the most LGBTQ kind of attractive place where you travel in Spain. Probably it's more like Torremolinos, the Gran Canaria, Barcelona, Madrid. But even in Valencia, on the main square, all the benches are in rainbow colors. A lot of the stairs to the metro stations are in rainbow colors. When you walk in downtown, you see rainbow flags in almost every block when they have these balconies. So they are like covered with rainbow flags. So that's like private people making LGBTQ inclusive communication. And all this makes me feel, as a person living there, as a person visiting there, oh my God, this is how they feel. This is what they are thinking about me. So that makes me feel like, okay, I can be visible. And I think that's the one reason why I also feel when visiting Spain and Valencia, Barcelona, I see LGBTQ people as well, more, because they are more open about themselves. They are not afraid to hold hands. They are not afraid to show affection. They are not afraid to be publicly, openly, and loud who they are. So that's a very good example how LGBTQ inclusive communication, in this case, just the rainbow colors, are making the difference.
Yeah, that's wonderful that they really support the community as from their own homes, like putting the flags on the balcony and on the city walk. You can see the colors and all that, which lead us to actually the next topic about the promoting LGBT friendly, gay friendly issues like the Pride Week. What do you think about the Pride Week? Is that really necessary to have a week where we bring those things up? Because I feel, okay, it's a good thing. We are, like, I feel every company during that week is super gay friendly, allow everybody, but after that week, it seems they forget all these values they just promoted for 1 week.
Of course, we have to understand that in 1969, even in USA, they still like attacked like gay bars and took everybody to jail. And the Stonewall riot that happened in 1969, that was the beginning of the Pride movement. So it's quite a short period of time. And Pride has been a very big, of course, it has taken our rights forward. But I feel like we are now entering a time where Pride has a totally different meaning. And I feel like if I could choose, I would like Pride Week or Pride Month just to be a celebration. We would just have fun. We would have parties. We would be loud. We would be out on the streets having fun. And we would do all the work to have this party during the 11 months of the year. But we are not still there. And that's what, like you said, a lot of companies are to push everything in that 1 week or 1 month. So they are giving speeches and training and promotion and campaigns and doing this Pride kind of a hassle during that short period. And I feel like there's a lot of companies, always when talking about inclusion, you always have to understand why acknowledge diversity, why is it important, and what you are really doing. And a lot of Pride or a lot of companies that are doing Pride campaigns or Pride, when I talk with them, I feel like they don't really understand. They don't really understand why they are doing this. And they don't even understand what they are doing. They are just doing it because everybody else is doing, and it's Pride Month, and this is what you're supposed to do. So I would suggest that companies would focus on the other 11 months of the year on the work that you do for diversity and inclusion, whether it's LGBTQ people or other people, and they would just have parties during the June month, the Pride Month. That's my...
Yeah. And you also, you do the keynote speaks about these topics. And have you faced any sort of discrimination, so to say, compared? Do you see any difference, like during the Pride Week or the rest of the year, considering these motivational speaks?
Yeah. Of course, I'm really happy that I started my business in the travel business, because in the travel business, I'm giving speeches all year round. But when I think about like companies in general, I'm always asked to give speeches only during Pride Week or Pride Month. So that kind of shows that companies are not really focusing on these issues during the year. They are just focusing on during the Pride Month or Pride Week. And I'm not saying that that's totally bad. That's totally wrong. But they should start thinking like, is this the right way? Because it's a very short time, and sometimes I'm even thinking that because Pride is actually a platform for companies to do LGBTQ inclusive communication. And it was very clear in 2020 when we had pandemic and we didn't have Pride. We didn't have any communication either. There was nothing going on. So if we didn't have Pride, we wouldn't have LGBTQ inclusive communication. So Pride is kind of a platform that companies are using, and they should really think like, is that the only way to do this? Is it just like our responsibility as LGBT community to kind of give you this platform because that's the only way you can do it? So in We Speak Gay, I'm like always saying like I speak gay every day. So the responsibility of companies is to talk gay every single day of the year and not just during the Pride. But it's still difficult for companies to realize this. It takes time.
Yeah, that's what it takes, a time. And
yeah,
if we compare your story from the small village in Finland to grow in a traditional way and have a family, and then take this huge risk to sort of change your life, to come out as you are. How you think your risk perception have changed? Maybe living there in the safe and then just going totally opposite.
I don't know.
Do you see your risk perception has changed somehow?
I don't know. Sometimes I feel like if I would have known how difficult this journey was, like starting my business, because in the beginning when I started my business, I didn't think about all these homophobic, because I was also kind of naive in the beginning. So I'm still not sure if I'm really courageous or brave in that sense. I'm still kind of but for me, the most important thing is always like intuition. I always believe that I do things that I feel are the right thing to do. Sometimes it may take a little bit more time because I really need to feel like this is the right thing to do. But I would like to be much more brave. I would like to be much more courageous than I am right now. And I'm kind of working on that still. I'm still a little bit like the little boy in the closet, feeling safe. And I need to challenge myself all the time. Probably from outside, it looks like I'm brave or courageous, but I still sometimes feel like I would like to be even more loud. I would like to be even more brave and more courageous and more like fighting in a way.
I'm sure we're gonna hear a lot of about We Speak Gay in the future. I have 2 more questions for you, Hannu, at the end, and just as you talk about the risks, can you see what are the maybe biggest risks in the future of We Speak Gay? Is there any fears or risks related to the future, or how do you see the future?
Yeah, of course. I would like to talk about the risk that people, like companies, when they start talking gay, the biggest risk is that they don't know what's going to happen. And the most important thing is always to know why you are doing this and what you are actually doing. Because if you have like comments from people that, okay, we will not come to this hotel or this restaurant because it's doing We Speak Gay, you really need to understand that why you are doing this, why this is important. But for me, of course, probably the biggest risk is that I will not grow. I need to be, more loud. I need to believe in myself. I need to believe in this cause. I feel like being too comfortable is the biggest risk. You need to challenge yourself and you need to just go for it. That's how I feel. My biggest risk is to be too comfortable with my business or with myself.
That's interesting, that to sort of getting used to the feeling, oh, everything is flowing. But
Yeah.
I think this seems we cannot stop about talking and bringing up. That's for sure. One question for you, Hannu: is there any person you would like to hear and see as a guest in my podcast, RisknFlow? Any person that maybe inspires you?
Well, of course, I have a lot of because when I started my business, I didn't really have inspirational people doing the same kind of things like me in Finland. So I have a lot of people outside Finland that I admire. I don't know, Mats Kallerud is one of my big idols. He's working with especially social media, how to attract LGBTQ people in social media. So there's a lot of international people. Maybe in Finland, of course, Dakota Robin, probably he's talking a lot about diversity and as a trans man. One of my maybe in Finland, one of my that I really admire in the beginning is Malin Gustafsson. She's running a company called Equalita, and she's one of the front runners in Finland, being working with especially gender equality for 20 years, and she's in a way probably a little bit has been my mentor.
Wow, thank you, Hannu. Sounds there's a lot of interesting and inspirational people to talk to. I'm sure we're gonna hear some of them also in the future. But thank you, Hannu, again for being here today and bringing these themes up. I'm sure we're gonna hear a lot more about We Speak Gay also in the globally in the all around the world.
Okay.
Thank you, Hannu. Wonderful.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great. Bye.
Thank you. RisknFlow say thank you, and we see in the next episode. See you.